As we're looking at the ship's history in particular, please see the video on Shokaku for the technical specifications of this ship. As part of the same production program that would yield the Yamato class, the carrier Zuikaku was laid down in the Kawasaki No. 1 slipway in Kobe, Japan in late May 1938. Unlike her sister ship over in Yokosuka, this slipway had most recently been home only to cruisers and seaplane carriers, but once Zuikaku was launched in late November 1939, this would change. At first, the large ocean liner Izumo Maru would take her place, but partway through construction she would change purpose and be completed as the carrier Hio, after which the carriers Taiho and Ikoma would be built on the same slipway. Zuikaku, meanwhile, was fitting out and commissioned into the Japanese Navy in late September 1941, almost immediately assigned to the new Carrier Division 5 in conjunction with her sister ship Shokaku. After a brief working-up period, she joined the rest of the Kido Butai for her first operational mission. Not even 3 months into service, she was to launch part of the strike on Pearl Harbor. At this point, Zuikaku, in common with all Kido Butai carriers, carried 18 fighters, with 5th Carrier Division taking advantage of their greater size compared to Hiryu and Soryu and their purpose-built nature compared to Akagi and Kaga, to carry a larger number of strike aircraft, 27 of each type. Upon her return to Japan, the ship was briefly dry-docked for maintenance, but less than a week later she was back out again for strikes in support of the Japanese advances in the Southwest Pacific. But there was fairly little to trouble her, and she was soon diverted back home in response to early US carrier attacks on the Marshall Islands. But after it became clear that these US operations were raids and not a continued offensive, she was assigned to the Indian Ocean Raid, or Operation C. For this operation, she was given 3 more fighters, but was down 6 of each type of strike aircraft, for a total air group of 63 compared to the 72 she'd had at Pearl Harbor. Zuikaku would launch multiple strikes, first at Colombo and Trincomalee, then at the cruisers Dorsetshire and Cornwall, and finally against the poor old carrier HMS Hermes and her escort. The ship's Val dive bombers saw the most action in these raids, and Zuikaku's air group suffered fairly minimal losses. Technically speaking, this meant that Zuikaku shared the honour of the first carrier versus carrier kill in this operation, although given Hermes carried no air group at the time and was not trying to fight back beyond anti-aircraft gunfire, whether you can append in battle to that is questionable. But if you want a true in-battle carrier versus carrier kill, go to what happened next. Zuikaku and her sister were assigned to cover the invasion of Port Moresby, which would lead to the Battle of the Coral Sea. At this point, wielding the same 63 aircraft group evenly split between types, her air group assisted in the sinking of the oiler Neosho and the destroyer Sims, in exchange for which the US Navy sank the light carrier Shoho. And the next day, the two sisters squared up to Lexington and Yorktown. The Japanese overall got the better of it. Lexington was sunk and Yorktown was damaged, and thanks to a passing rain squall, Zuikaku had cover from the counterattack, which meant Shōkaku took up most of the attention and was damaged by 3 hits, but Zuikaku's air group had taken more losses. Although fresh aircraft to replace the damaged ones could have brought a combined air group up to strength enough for Zuikaku to sail with the rest of the Kido Butai from Midway, this was not done, and both sisters would thus miss the destruction of the rest of the Kido Butai. The pair would now be split up, as Shokaku would be in dock for repairs. Zuikaku instead headed up a mixed bag of smaller carriers in a resupply operation to the Aleutians, and after repairs were finished, Shokaku rejoined her. Zuikaku's air group now consisted of 27 fighters, 27 Val dive bombers, and only 18 Kate torpedo bombers, as losses to the 3-man Kates were harder to replace, and they'd proved relatively ineffective in their secondary level bombing role. They also happened to take up more space. Next, it was on to the Guadalcanal campaign. At the Battle of the Eastern Solomons, the sisters faced off against Lexington and Enterprise, trading minor damage on Shokaku with solid hits on Enterprise, but suffering more losses to their air groups compared to the Americans, although this time Zuikaku's air group did a little better than Shokaku's. Just over a month later, and it was time for round 2, this time against Enterprise and Hornet at the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands. Once again, Zuikaku lucked out and avoided damage, while Shokaku was hit. with Japanese aircraft hitting Enterprise again and eventually mortally wounding Hornet, although once more the Japanese air groups took massive losses, with some of the later strikes only possible because Zuikaku was marshalling mixed groups of survivors from the previous waves. After this, Zuikaku spent some time behind the front lines, among other things being used to reinforce Rabaul, and at this point the ship had long been moved to be part of 1st Carrier Division along with Shōkaku and Zuiho. After sending several air groups ashore in defence of various places, the ship was re-equipped with later models of Zero, and the Vals and Kates gave way to D4Y Judys and B6N Jills respectively. Not that this did them all that much good, as Shokaku and Taiho were almost immediately lost to submarine attacks at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Hio was sunk by US aircraft, and Zuikaku, finally, was hit by US carrier aircraft. Remarkably, even after this pasting, the Japanese Navy was still able to muster 4 large, 4 small, and 2 hybrid carriers, and was planning another major stand for when the US forces invaded the Philippines. But some bright spark decided to send the partially trained air groups that were being rebuilt for the carrier forces to go and defend Formosa, now Taiwan, against US carrier strikes, where half-trained pilots were promptly cut to pieces. This in turn meant that when Zuikaku was deployed to the Battle of Leyte Gulf as part of the Northern Force, she carried scarcely any aircraft at all and was essentially serving as a gigantic distraction. That, however, worked. Admiral Halsey vented his fleet carrier's fury on the force, and poor old Zuikaku, covered in bomb and torpedo hits, would finally sink beneath the waves on the 25th of October 1944, the last of the Pearl Harbor carriers to be destroyed.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.